New CBS Sunday.
The Grammys, baby!
History will be made.
Live, unfiltered, unexpected.
Woo!
Bigger than ever.
I was a ghost.
Bigger stars, bigger performances. Music's biggest night is getting bigger.
Now you see what all the hype is about.
Trevor Noah hosts the Grammy Awards live.
Anything is possible.
CBS Sunday and streaming on Paramount Plus.
I have created
the most advanced AI soldier.
The wait is over. Tron Ares now streaming on Disney Plus.
We are looking for something you've discovered. And some of us will stop at nothing to get it.
Ready?
The countdown is complete.
There's no going back.
Our directive is clear.
Hang on!
Tron Ares now streaming on Disney Plus. Rated PG-13.
Oh, it's such a clutch off-season pickup, Dave.
I was worried we'd bring back the same team.
I meant those blackout motorized shades.
Blinds.com made it crazy affordable to replace our old blinds.
Hard to install?
No, it's easy. I installed these and then got some from my mom. She talked to a design consultant for free and scheduled a professional measure and install.
Hall of Fame son.
They're the #1 online retailer of custom window coverings in the world.
Blinds.com is the GOAT.
Shop up to 40% off site-wide, plus an extra 10% off every order and a free professional measure happening right now at Blinds.com.
All right. Welcome back to Infinite Rabbit Hole. My name is Jeremy, and here's your Fringe News for January 22nd, 2026. Today, we're stepping into some uncomfortable territory, and I mean that in the best possible way, because these stories aren't just strange. They're the kind that make you question what you thought you knew about reality, technology, and the limits of human understanding. Artificial intelligence just analyzed over 150,000 UFO sighting reports and found patterns that shouldn't exist. Patterns so specific, so consistent, they're forcing even the skeptics to ask uncomfortable questions about what's actually flying around in our skies. We're diving deep, literally, into an underwater discovery at 2,570 meters below the ocean surface. Military sonars picked up something with geometry, with structure, angles that nature doesn't typically produce at those depths. And the people who've seen the data are very carefully choosing their words. There's a 10-second signal transmitted from one of the most distant sources ever detected. No explanation, no follow-up, just a brief, intense burst of energy from a corner of space we barely understand, leaving astronomers scrambling for answers that don't seem to exist. Good morning, Spectrum. What's up, man? We'll talk about Baba Vanga, a blind Bulgarian mystic who's been dead since 1996, but whose prediction of a large spacecraft arriving in November of this year is currently going viral. Whether you believe in prophecy or not, the timing is interesting. And then there's the crisis happening in cryptozoology right now. AI-generated videos so convincing they're destroying decades of legitimate research. We've entered an era where a teenager with the right software can fabricate footage more believable than anything captured in the wild. And that's a problem. For our Patreon supporters, we've got an exclusive segment 6 digging into psychedelic-assisted therapy, psilocybin, MDMA, substances that have been illegal for half a century, now moving toward insurance coverage and standardized medical protocols. It's a seismic shift, and the implications go way beyond medicine. So if you're already subscribed, or if you're not already subscribed, hit the button now. If you want access to Segment 6 and other exclusive content, head over to patreon.com/infinite rabbit hole. All the source links for tonight's topics will be readily available there. And if you want to catch us live every time we record, join us at twitch.tv/infinite rabbit hole. All right, let's get into it. And welcome back to Infinite Rabbit Hole. What up, Kenzar? Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, everybody in the chat. Appreciate you joining me for this nice early bird episode. So let's talk about data for a minute. Not speculation, not some guy claiming he saw lights in the sky after a few beers. I'm talking about 152,000 UFO sighting reports fed into an AI system, and what came back is specific enough to make you uncomfortable. A man by the name Brian Decker published this analysis on January 5th of this year, 2026, that makes it different from every other attempt to make sense of UFO sightings. Is scale and methodology. Decker built an AI specifically to extract structured data from witness narratives. This matters because people describe same experiences in completely different ways, different words, different focus, different details, trying to find patterns manually. Honestly, it's a mess. But AI doesn't care about narrative style. It extracts features, categorizes observations, finds correlations a human would miss simply because the dataset's too massive. Decker took the National UFO Reporting Center's database, maintained by Peter Davenport since the 70s, one of the most comprehensive civilian UFO databases in all of existence, and analyzed every single report across 35 dimensions and 8 categories. What came back wasn't vague. It was disturbingly precise. Triangular craft are almost exclusively nocturnal. When you map sightings by time of day, the correlation is so strong it's hard to wave away. Not a slight preference for nighttime, a near total absence of daytime reports for the shape. That's not random, that's behavioral. Disc-shaped craft, your classic flying saucer, are 5 times more likely to involve entity encounters than any other shape. 5 times. The probability they also report seeing humanoid figures jumps dramatically compared to triangles, spheres, and cigars. And most sightings across all shapes, all locations, all time periods describe complete silence. No engine noise, no rotor wash, no sonic boom, just pure silence. This cuts across the entire dataset. Silent operation appears universal regardless of shape, size, or behavior. If these were misidentified craft or drones, you wouldn't see such clean patterns. You'd see noise, random distribution, sightings at all times of the day, inconsistent descriptions, but instead, there's what we call clustering, behavioral consistency that suggests intentionality. Decker's analysis breaks it down by shape, sound, time of day, movement patterns, physical effects like radiation burns or electromagnetic interference, entity encounters, geographic distribution, and duration. The system cross-references it all, or the cross-referenced it, looked at how these variables interact with each other. Triangles at night, disks with entities, orbs with erratic movement, sudden stops, right angle turns, acceleration that would turn a human pilot into paste, and silent operation across everything, not specific to one type, universal. So, if these objects are operating under intelligent control and the patterns are this consistent across decades and geographic regions, what does that tell us? You don't get behavioral consistency like this from random misidentifications, not from weather balloons or satellites or even Venus. You get it from something that operates according to rules, something with purpose, something following a protocol. The most unsettling part, Decker makes no attempt to explain what these objects are. He presents the data, shows you the patterns, gives you these beautiful, terrifying charts laying out exactly how consistent the phenomenon is, then leaves you to sit with it. Once you see the patterns, you can't unsee them. So what do they actually mean? If we're seeing this level of consistency across 152,000 reports spanning decades, are we looking at multiple sources operating under similar principles, or one coordinated intelligence? Depends entirely on how you interpret the data. If you approach this from a purely terrestrial perspective, meaning you assume these are advanced military craft, then the consistency makes sense. Different platforms, same operational doctrine. You'd expect triangular craft to operate at night because they're designed for stealth. You'd expect silence because that's the whole point of advanced propulsion. The patterns would reflect strategic choices made by whoever's deploying these things. The U.S. military has been working on silent propulsion for decades. The F-117 Nighthawk, B-2 Spirit, and the alleged TR-3B all designed to minimize detection, so it's not unreasonable to think some of these sightings are classified aerospace platforms, operating under strict protocols, night operations, radio silence, and limited deployment areas. But here's the problem. The sightings go back decades. Before stealth technology, before silent drones, before the kind of propulsion systems that would allow for the movement patterns witnesses describe. Triangular craft sightings don't start in the 70s or 80s with the F-117. They go back to the 50s and 60s. Same shape, same silent operation, same nocturnal behavior. So either we're looking at a decades-long covert program that's consistently outpaced publicly acknowledged aerospace development by 30 to 40 years, or we're looking at something non-human. If it's non-human, the behavioral consistency could suggest two things. One, multiple sources, different civilizations, different origins, operating under similar principles because these principles are based on physics we don't understand yet. Think convergent evolution, but for technology. You're dealing with the same laws of physics, you might arrive at similar solutions independently. Birds, bats, and insects all developed wings separately because flight requires certain aerodynamic principles. If multiple non-human intelligence are visiting Earth and they're all constrained by the same physics laws, you might expect them to develop similar technologies. Silent propulsion, because it's the most efficient way to move through an atmosphere without creating disturbance. Triangular shapes, because that geometry offers the best combination of lift, stability, and stealth. Nocturnal operations, because avoiding detection is a universal priority. Or two, a single coordinated intelligence with a specific operational methodology. Triangles operate at night for a reason. Disks interact with humans for a reason. The silence serves a purpose. All of it part of a larger pattern we can't see yet because we don't have the full data set. Personally, I lean towards this second explanation. The patterns aren't just consistent. They're too consistent. If you had multiple independent actors showing up randomly over 70 years, you'd expect more variance, different operational philosophies, different approaches to the same problem. But what we're seeing looks more like a structured approach, like someone running experiments, testing different configurations under different conditions, documenting the results. Think about it this way. If you were a scientist studying an unfamiliar ecosystem, you wouldn't just send one type of probe. You'd send different instruments designed for different observations. One for atmospheric analysis, one for biological sampling, one for the magnetic field mapping. Each tool serves a specific function, and you deploy them systematically based on what you're trying to learn. That's what this data looks like to me. Different craft designs deployed for different purposes. Triangles for long-range surveillance, hence the nighttime operations and the geographic spread. Disks for close-range interaction, hence the entity encounters. Orbs for rapid transit between locations. Each shape corresponds to a function. The consistency suggests a single organized intelligence coordinating the whole operation, which brings us to another uncomfortable detail. Disk-shaped craft are 5 times more likely to involve entity encounters. 5 times, not a slight increase, a significant repeatable pattern showing up consistently across the entire dataset. So what does that tell us? Is the shape itself significant or just a marker for a specific type of interaction? Sounds trivial until you think about it for more than 5 seconds. Why would the shape of the craft correlate with whether or not entities are observed? If these were just misidentified aircraft, there's no reason a disc shape would be associated with humanoid figures more than a triangle or sphere. The correlation has to mean something. One possibility, the shape is functionally tied to the type of mission. Discs show up when the goal is interaction. Triangles show up when the goal is surveillance. Orbs show up for rapid transit. I've already went over these. Each design serves a specific purpose, and entity encounters happen more often with discs because that's the platform designed for close range contact. It's not that the shape causes the encounter, it's that the encounter requires the specific design. Maybe disc-shaped craft have features triangular craft don't. Medical bays, communication systems, observation decks that allow for the entity to interact. Maybe the shape itself is optimized for hovering at low altitude, which is where most entity encounters occur. Witnesses report discs descending slowly, landing, or hovering just above the ground. That's very different from the high-altitude, fast-moving behavior associated with triangles. Another possibility, and this one's darker, the shape isn't the relevant factor at all. It's a marker, a visual cue that tells us which type of intelligence we're dealing with. If you've got multiple non-human actors operating in the same airspace and they each prefer different designs, then the shape becomes a signature. Discs belong to one group, triangles belong to another. The fact that discs are associated with entity encounters tell us that one particular group is more interested in direct contact than the others. We see this in human military operations all the time. Different branches use different aircraft for different missions. Air Force uses fighter jets, Navy uses carriers and helicopters. Special operations use stealth choppers. You can identify the mission based on the equipment. So if you're dealing with a non-human intelligence and they operate under similar organizational principles, then the shape of the craft might tell us which faction we're dealing with and what their intentions are. But here's what really bothers me about this data. The encounters aren't random. they're not even distributed, or they're not evenly distributed. 5 times more likely means there's intent. When a disc-shaped craft shows up, there's a higher probability that whoever's piloting wants to be seen, wants to interact, and that raises the question, why? What is the purpose? Are they studying us, running biological samples, monitoring our development, or is it something else entirely? Something we don't have the framework to understand yet. Because if the pattern is intentional, then we're not just dealing with a phenomenon, we're dealing with a strategy, and we have to know, or we have no idea what the end game is. Decker's analysis doesn't answer these questions. It can't. All it can do is show us the patterns and force us to acknowledge that they exist. But the implications are staggering. If this data holds up under scrutiny, if other researchers can replicate these findings using different data sets, then we're looking at evidence of structured, intentional activity that spans decades. And the silence from the scientific community, the lack of institutional interest in pursuing this line of research, that silence becomes harder and harder to justify. Because the data is there, the patterns are there, and the questions they raise aren't going away. We're going deep for this one.
The world moves fast. Your workday, even faster. Pitching products, drafting reports, analyzing data. Microsoft 365 Copilot is your AI assistant for work. Built into Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and other Microsoft 365 apps you use. Helping you quickly write, analyze, create, and summarize. So you can cut through clutter and clear a path to your best work. Learn more at Microsoft.com/M365 Copilot.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
AI is incredible. It can teach you how to fry an egg and even write a poem, pirate style. Yarr! But it knows nothing about your work. Slackbot is different. It doesn't just know the facts. It knows your schedule. It can turn a brainstorm into a brief. And it doesn't need to be taught. Because Slackbot isn't just another AI. It's AI that knows your work as well as you do. Visit slack.com/meet Slackbot to learn more.
Segment 2. Literally. January 3rd, 2026. Reports started surfacing about a discovery made by military sonar operations at a depth of 2,570 meters below the ocean surface. That's just over 8,400 feet. For context, that's deeper than the crush depth of most submarines. It's a region where pressure exceeds 250 atmospheres, where sunlight has never penetrated, where the environment is so hostile that very few forms of life can survive. And at that depth, military equipment detected something that shouldn't be there. A structure, not a geological formation, not a shipwreck, a structure with geometry, with straight edges, with right angles, features that suggest deliberate construction. Before we go any farther, let's talk about what we know and what we don't. The official details on this discovery are extremely limited. The story broke through a website called ilab.org, which published an article titled, "At 2,570 meters below the surface, the military makes a record-breaking discovery that will reshape archaeology." And the language in that article is careful. I'd say even very careful. They describe a routine mission, a classified sonar sweep, another line in a report destined to be skimmed and forgotten. When the anomaly, shape on the sonar feed that was, quote, too clean, too symmetrical, too deliberate to be natural, the article quotes an unnamed technician saying, quote, "This looks," and then the sentence just trails off like they couldn't even finish the thought. So we're dealing with a discovery made during a classified military operation, which means the data is not publicly available. The sonar scans are not publicly available. The analysis is not publicly available. Everything we know comes from secondhand reporting and leaks from people who were allegedly in the room when the discovery was made. That makes the story both frustrating and fascinating. On one hand, we can't verify the details, can't examine the evidence. We're relying on descriptions from people who may or may not have seen the actual data. But on the other hand, The fact that this story exists at all suggests something happened. Someone saw something unusual enough to leak it. Someone thought it was important enough to risk their clearance by talking about it. So let's talk about what the reports describe, even if we can't confirm every detail. The description itself raises questions worth exploring. The structure was detected at 2,570 meters. That's significant for several reasons. First, at that depth, you're below the continental shelf. You're in the abyssal zone, where the ocean floor consists primarily of sediment that's been accumulating for millions of years. Any structure at that depth would either have to be extremely old or placed there deliberately after the sediment settled. Second, the depth makes natural explanations more difficult. Geological formations at that depth tend to be shapeless, eroded, covered in layers of sediment and biological material. You don't get sharp edges. You don't get clean geometry. The pressure in the environment don't allow for it. So if the sonar is picking up straight lines, right angles, and symmetrical shapes, that's a problem for any natural explanation. The article describes the structure as having columns, angles, geometry that had no business existing in the layer of the Earth. It mentions that the people who saw the sonar feed, experienced military officers, people who spent years looking at the underwater topography, were unsettled enough to stop what they were doing and pay attention. One officer allegedly said, quote, "We're not chasing Atlantis, we're chasing data. If the data ends up rewriting a chapter of our past, so be it. But we'll let the evidence speak first." That's the approach we need to take here, because the moment you say, quote unquote, underwater structure and 2,570 meters, people immediately jump to Atlantis, lost civilizations, ancient aliens, all the stuff that makes serious researchers roll their eyes. And I get it. The fringe community has a bad habit of taking an anomaly and immediately spinning it into the most sensational explanation possible. But here's the thing. We don't need to invoke Atlantis to make this discovery interesting. We don't need ancient astronauts. We just need to acknowledge that if there is a structure at that depth, and if it shows signs of deliberate construction, then we have a problem, because it doesn't fit into our current understanding of human history, geological processes, or underwater archaeology. So let's explore the possibilities, starting with the most conservative explanation and working our way out. Possibility 1. It's a natural geological formation that happens to look artificial. This is the default position for any anomaly. The ocean floor is full of weird shapes, volcanic activity, tectonic shifts, erosion patterns. All of these can create formations that look geometric from certain angles. There are places in the ocean where basalt columns form hexagonal patterns that look almost man-made. Underwater rock formations that resemble pyramids, walls, even roads. So here's the problem with that explanation in this case. The people looking at the sonar weren't amateurs. They were military personnel trained to distinguish between natural topography and artificial objects. Submarines rely on sonar to navigate. If you can't tell the difference between a rock and a shipwreck, you're not qualified to operate sonar equipment. So when these people say the shape was too clean, too symmetrical, they're comparing it to thousands of hours of sonar data showing what natural formations actually look like. And they didn't just see one anomalous shape. The description mentions columns and angles, plural, multiple geometric features in proximity to each other. That's harder to explain as natural coincidence. Possibility number 2. It's a shipwreck or some kind of modern human debris. Maybe a submarine that went down. Maybe cargo that sank. Maybe military equipment that was deliberately scuttled. This would explain the geometry, the straight edges, the artificial appearance. It's a reasonable hypothesis. But the depth is a problem. 2,570 meters is deeper than most shipwrecks. The Titanic sits at 3,800 meters, and that's considered an exceptionally deep wreck. Most sunken vessels are in shallower water, closer to shipping lanes and coastal areas. And if this were a known wreck, a submarine, a cargo ship, or a military vessel, there would be records, documentation. The military would know what it is. The fact that we don't, or at least the fact that people who saw the sonar were surprised enough to report it as an anomaly, suggests it's not something in the database, not a cataloged wreck, something unexpected. Possibility number 3. It's an ancient structure that predates known human civilization, and this is where it gets really uncomfortable. If there's a man-made structure at 2,570 meters, then either it was built before the ocean reached that depth, or it was built by someone with the capability to construct at extreme underwater depths. Let's talk about sea level changes. During the last glacial maximum, roughly 20,000 years ago, global sea levels were about 120 meters lower than they are today. That's significant. Coastal areas that are now underwater were dry land. We know early humans lived in those areas. We found archaeological sites on submerged continental shelves all over the world. But 120 meters is nowhere near 2,570 meters, even at the peak of the last ice age. You're not getting that kind of sea level drop. So if this structure was built on dry land, it would have to date back millions of years, long before anatomically correct modern humans existed, long before any known hominid species had the cognitive capability or capacity to build anything resembling architecture, which brings us to the other option. It was built underwater by someone with the technology to operate at extreme depths, and that opens up a whole different set of questions. Modern humans didn't develop the ability to build at those depths until the mid-20th century. Deep-sea submersibles, remotely operated vehicles, specialized construction equipment designed to withstand pressure or the crushing pressure. So if there's an artificial structure down there and it predates modern technology, then who built it and how? The article mentions that the discovery, quote, asks what else we have completely missed. That's the right question. The ocean floor is largely unmapped. We have better maps of the surface of Mars than we do of the bottom of our oceans. The technology to survey deep ocean environments is expensive, time-consuming, and limited in scope. Most of what we know about the abyssal zone comes from sonar sweeps conducted by military vessels, and those surveys aren't publicly available. So it's entirely possible, likely even, that there are other structures down there, other anomalies, other things that don't fit into our current models of geology or human history. We just haven't found them yet because we haven't looked. And that brings us to the bigger question. If the structure is real, if it holds up under further investigation, what does that mean for our understanding of the past? We tend to think of human history as a linear progression: hunter-gatherers, agriculture, cities, civilizations, technology, a steady climb from primitive to advanced. But what if that's not the whole story? What if there were other chapters that got erased? Not by conspiracy, not by cover-up, just by time, by rising sea levels, by geological processes that bury the evidence under miles of sediment. We know sea levels have fluctuated dramatically over the past 100,000 years. We know coastal areas where humans tend to settle because of access to resources have been submerged and exposed multiple times. And we know that if you want to erase a civilization from the archaeological record, all you have to do is sink it under a few thousand meters of ocean. The pressure, the sediment, the lack of oxygen, it all conspires to destroy organic material and corrode anything metal. So if there was an advanced culture 10,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago, 50,000 years ago, and they lived primarily in coastal regions that are now underwater, we wouldn't know. We'd have no evidence because the evidence is sitting at the bottom of the ocean, inaccessible to everyone except military submarines and deep-sea research vessels. And here's the uncomfortable part. Even if we find evidence, even if structures like this one are confirmed, the institutional resistance to revising our historical timeline is enormous. Archaeology is a conservative field. It has to be. You can't just throw out established models every time someone finds something weird. You need reproducible evidence, peer review, consensus. But that conservatism also means paradigm-shifting discoveries get dismissed, ignored, or explained away until the weight of evidence becomes overwhelming. And by then, decades have passed. Careers have been built on the old model. Textbooks have been written. The idea of rewriting everything is too disruptive to contemplate. So even if this structure turns out to be real, even if follow-up surveys confirm it's artificial, I wouldn't expect the mainstream archaeological community to embrace it immediately. I'd expect caution, skepticism, demands for more data, and unfortunately that's fair. That's how science is supposed to work. But in the meantime, we're left with a tantalizing possibility that somewhere 2,570 meters below the surface, there's something that shouldn't exist. Something with geometry. Something with purpose. And the people who've seen the sonar scans, the people who were in the room when the discovery was made, are choosing their words very carefully because they know what they saw, and they know it doesn't fit. The article ends with a note about the research teams working on the site. They're following a strict protocol. Record before touching. Every pass of the remotely operated vehicle maps the area in 3 dimensions, building a digital twin of the structure with millimetric precision. These scans become a time capsule, freezing the site in its current state before any sampling or disturbance happens. That's the right approach. If this is real, if it's as significant as the initial report suggests, then we only get one chance to study it properly, one chance to document it before human intervention changes it forever. So we wait, we watch, and we hope that whoever's holding the data decides the public has a right to know what's sitting at the bottom of the ocean. Because if there's one thing this discovery proves, it's that we still don't know our own planet as well as we think we do. And the ocean, vast, deep, and largely unexplored, is still keeping secret. Now for our third segment, January 16th, 2026. If you weren't paying attention to the right corners of the internet, you probably missed it entirely. A 10-second radio signal detected by the Australian Square Kilometre Array Pathfinder telescope, coming from a source so distant that the light and the radio waves have been traveling toward us for longer than complex life has existed on Earth. 10 seconds. That's all it lasted. But in those 10 seconds, astronomers detected a pattern that has no natural explanation they can confirm. Let me back up. Context matters here. Radio astronomy is all about listening. We point massive arrays of antennas at the sky and collect electromagnetic radiation across different frequencies. Most of what we detect is noise. Cosmic background radiation left over from the Big Bang. Emissions from pulsars, rapidly rotating neutron stars that sweep beams of radiation across space like cosmic lighthouses. Signals from quasars, black holes, supernova. The universe is loud if you're listening in the right spectrum. And we've gotten very good at identifying natural sources. We know what a pulsar sounds like. We know what happens when galaxies collide, when stars explode, when gas clouds collapse. We've built models, cataloged thousands of sources. When something new shows up, we run it through those models to see if it fits. The signal detected on January 16th doesn't fit. The Australian Square Kilometre Array, Pathfinder, aka ASKAP, or ASCAP, is located in Western Australia. In one of the most radio-quiet regions of the planet.
How does PwC take your company to the leading edge? They bring the sharpest minds in tech to your team, so you can bring the ideas that will transform your business. They're passionate about your industry, so you can walk into any room with every advantage. And they're with you every step of the way, so you can know you're headed in the right direction. PwC builds for what's next, so you can get there now. Get started at pwc.com/us/leading edge.
It's a precursor to the Square Kilometre Array, which, when completed, will be the most sensitive radio telescope ever built. But even in its current form, ASCAP is powerful. It can detect faint signals from incredibly distant sources, survey large sections of the sky simultaneously, and it's designed specifically to catch transient events, things that flash into existence and then disappear, which is exactly what happened January 16th. The signal appeared at a frequency of 1.42 gigahertz. That's significant because 1.42 gigahertz is right in the middle of what's called the water hole, a relatively quiet region of the radio spectrum where hydrogen and hydrosol molecules emit radiation. It's called the water hole because hydrogen and hydrosol combine to make water. And it's long been theorized that if an advanced civilization wanted to broadcast a signal that would be noticed by other civilizations, they'd choose a frequency in this range, because any species sophisticated enough to build radio telescopes would be listening to the water hole. It's where the universe is quietest, where a signal would stand out. And this signal stood out. 10 seconds of continuous emission. No frequency drift, no Doppler shift, no scintillation. The twinkling effect you get when radio waves pass through interstellar gas just clean, steady signal that appeared, held for 10 seconds, and vanished. The source was triangulated to a region of space approximately 8.7 billion light years away. That's not a typo. 8.7 billion. For perspective, the universe is about 13.8 billion years old. So this signal originated when the universe was roughly 5 billion years old, before our solar system existed. Earth formed, before the sun ignited. Whatever generated that signal sent out those radio waves 8.7 billion years ago. They've been traveling through space ever since, crossing voids between galaxies, passing through clouds of gas and dust, bending around gravitational fields. And on January 16th, 2026, they reached Earth. Here's where it gets tricky. When you detect a signal from that distance, you can't just point a telescope at the exact same spot and expect to see it again. Space is expanding. The source has moved. The signal may have been a one-time event. And even if it wasn't, even if the source is still broadcasting, we won't know for another 8.7 billion years. So the only data we have is what ASCAP captured in those 10 seconds. And the team analyzing that data is being very careful about what they say publicly. The official line is that it's a, quote, fast radio burst, or FRB. Fast radio bursts are one of the most mysterious phenomena in astrophysics. Extremely bright pulses of radio emission that last anywhere from a fraction of a millisecond to a few seconds. They're detected regularly. Hundreds have been cataloged since the first one was discovered in 2007. For the most part, we think they're natural, probably caused by magnetars, neutron stars, with incredibly powerful magnetic fields that occasionally release bursts of energy. But here's the problem. Most FRBs last less than a second. This one lasted 10, and most FRBs show frequency drift, the signal sweeping across a range of frequencies over the course of the burst. This one didn't. It stayed locked at 1.42 gigahertz. No variation, no drift, just a constant tone. And when you look at the signal structure, when you analyze the waveform, it's not chaotic. It's not random. There's a pattern. The details of that pattern haven't been released publicly. The research team is still working on the analysis, but according to sources close to the project, and we're talking about leaks here, not official statements, the signal contains what appears to be a repeating sequence. A series of pulses embedded within the 10-second transmission, and the spacing between those pulses is regular, too regular to be accidental. I want to be clear, we're not talking about a message, not binary code or mathematical proofs or anything like that. We're talking about a structure, a framework, something that suggests the signal wasn't just a random burst of energy. It was organized. And that raises the question, organized by what? If this is a natural phenomenon, a magnetar, a colliding neutron star binary, some exotic astrophysical event we haven't discovered yet, then we need to figure out what kind of process can produce a 10-second radio burst with no frequency drift and an internal structure that appears non-random. That's hard. The known mechanisms for generating fast radio bursts don't predict that kind of behavior. Magnetars release energy in bursts. Yes, but those bursts are violent, chaotic. They occur across a range of frequencies. You don't get a clean, stable 10-second tone from a magnetar. It's like the difference between an explosion and a laser. One is messy and the other one is controlled. So if it's not a magnetar, what is it? Some researchers are suggesting it could be a previously unknown type of pulsar. Pulsars emit regular pulses of radiation as they rotate, and the timing can be extraordinarily precise. But pulsars emit continuously. You can point a telescope at a pulsar and detect it over and over again because it's always there, spinning away. This signal appeared once and disappeared. That's not consistent with a pulsar behavior. Others are suggesting it could be related to a gravitational lens event, or lensing event, where the gravity of a massive object bends and amplifies light or radio waves from a background source. Maybe something passed in front of the source, magnifying the signal just long enough for us to detect it. That would explain why it appeared and then vanished. But it doesn't explain the internal structure, doesn't explain why the signal was so clean. And then there's the third possibility, the one no mainstream astronomer wants to say out loud, but everyone's thinking about it, I can guarantee you. What if it's artificial? What if 8.7 billion years ago, someone pointed a transmitter at our section of the galaxy and broadcast a signal? Not to us specifically, they couldn't have known we'd be here, but maybe they were broadcasting in all directions, sending out a beacon, a calling card, a way of saying, we exist, we're here, we're thinking, building, transmitting, if anyone's listening, this is us. And if that's what this is, if this signal came from a technological civilization that existed when the universe was only 5 billion years old, then we need to sit with that for a moment, because it would mean we're not first. Not even close. Somewhere, billions of years before Earth formed, someone else figured out how to build a civilization advanced enough to send radio signals across intergalactic distances, and they're gone now. They have to be. 8.7 billion years is an incomprehensible amount of time. Stars are born and die in that span. Galaxies collide and merge. Whatever sent that signal, if it was a civilization, they're most likely dust now, scattered across the cosmos and forgotten. But the signal remains. Propagation outward at the speed of light. A ghost of something that might have been. Let's talk about the implications if this is real, if this signal is confirmed to be artificial. The consequences are profound. First, it would mean that intelligent life is, or was, common enough in the universe that we've detected evidence of it from 8.7 billion light years away. Think about that. We're not talking about a signal from a nearby star system, not our own galaxy. We're talking about a source so distant that the light we see from the region of space shows us a universe that looks completely different from the universe today. If civilizations are common enough that we can detect one at that distance, then the universe is teeming with them, or at least it was. We have no idea how many other civilizations might have risen and fallen in the 8.7 billion years since that signal was sent. Second, it would mean that the technological capability to send a signal that can be detected across billions of light years is achievable. We can't do that, not even close yet. The most powerful radio transmitters we have on Earth, like the Arecibo message sent in 1974, would be undetectable from more than a few dozen light years away. The signal would be too faint, lost in the background noise of the universe. But this signal crossed 8.7 billion light years and was still strong enough to be detected by ASCAP. That means whoever sent it had access to energy on a scale that we can barely imagine. We're talking about a civilization that might have been harnessing the output of entire stars. A Kurdisev Type 2 civilization or higher. Something so advanced that our technology looks primitive by comparison. Third, it raises the possibility that there are other signals out there, other transmissions from other civilizations, and we're only just starting to look. ASCAP has been operational for a few years. The square kilometer array isn't even finished yet. We've surveyed a tiny fraction of the sky and the frequencies where these signals might appear. And if we've already found one, how many more are waiting to be discovered? But here's the thing that keeps me up at night. The silence. If the signal is artificial, if it came from a civilization billions of years old, why is it only 10 seconds? Why not a continuous broadcast? Why not a repeating pattern we can detect over and over again? Well, here we go, breaking down the possibilities again. One, it was a one-time transmission, a deliberate burst sent out into the universe with no expectation of a reply. Maybe it was a memorial, a way of saying we were here. Maybe it was the last act of a dying civilization, a final message before they were wiped out by a catastrophe they couldn't prevent. Two, it's part of a larger transmission that we missed. ASCAP wasn't pointed at that region of space continuously. It was doing a survey, sweeping across the sky. Maybe the signal had been broadcasting for hours or days before we detected it. Maybe it continued after we moved on to survey the next region. We caught 10 seconds in the middle. The rest is lost. Three, it was directed. Not a broadcast in all directions, but a narrow beam pointed at specific targets. And by pure chance, Earth happened to be in the path of that beam for 10 seconds. The sources rotation or orbital motion move the beam away, and it won't point our way again for thousands or millions of years, if ever. Or 4, it wasn't meant for us at all. Maybe it was a communication between 2 points, a signal sent from one location to another, and we just happened to be in a line of sight. We intercepted something we were never supposed to hear. All of these possibilities are unsettling in their own way. They all point to the same conclusion. We're listening to a universe that's full of voices, and most of them are speaking to each other, not to us. We're eavesdropping on conversations we don't understand, using a technology that's barely sensitive enough to catch the faintest whispers. And the voices we do hear, they're echoes. Messages from civilizations that might not exist anymore. Radio waves that have been traveling for billions of years, carrying information from a universe that no longer resembles the one we see today. The team analyzed the January 16th signal as being cautious. They're not making bold claims, not jumping to conclusions. They're doing what scientists are supposed to do, examining the data, running simulations, checking for errors, looking for alternative explanation. That's good. That's necessary. But at some point, if the data holds up, if no natural explanation emerges, they're going to have to consider the possibility that this signal is exactly what it appears to be. A transmission from someone, somewhere, who wanted to be heard. And if that's the case, then we have to ask, what do we do about it? We can't reply. The source is 8.7 billion light years away. Even if we sent a response at the speed of light, it wouldn't reach them for another 8.7 billion years. And by then, the universe will have changed beyond recognition. Stars will have burned out, galaxies will have drifted apart, whatever was there won't be there anymore. So the signal stands as a monument, a marker, proof that we're not alone, or at least that we weren't always alone. And maybe that's enough. Maybe just knowing that someone else was out there, thinking, building, transmitting, maybe that's the message, not the content of the signal. Just the fact that it exists. Because it tells us that intelligence arises, that consciousness emerges, that civilizations capable of reaching across the cosmos are possible. And if it happened once, 8.7 billion years ago, it can happen again. Maybe it already has. Maybe there are signals from closer sources, from civilizations that are still thriving, still broadcasting, still waiting for someone to listen. And if we keep looking, if we build better telescopes, more sensitive receivers, wider surveys, maybe we'll hear them. Or maybe we won't. Maybe the universe is full of voices, calling out into the void, and the distances are just too vast. The timescale is too long for any two civilizations to ever make contact. Either way, the 10-segment signal from January 16th reminds us that we live in a universe far stranger and more populated than we ever imagined. And somewhere, 8.7 billion light years away, something or someone spoke to us. For our 4th segment, let's do something a little different. Let's talk about prophecy. I know what you're thinking. Prophecy doesn't belong in a show about fringe news and unexplained phenomena. Prophecy is fortune-telling, cold reading, vague predictions that people retrofit to match events after the fact.
Adobe Acrobat Studio, so brand new. Show me all the things PDFs can do. Do your work with ease and speed. PDF Spaces is all you need. Do hours of research in an instant with key insights from an AI assistant. Pick a template with a click. Now your prezzo looks super slick. Close that deal? Yeah, you won. Do that, doing that, did that, done. Now you can do that with Acrobat. Now you can do that with the all-new Acrobat. It's time to do your best work with the all-new Adobe Acrobat Studio.
Well, most of the time you're probably right. But there was a woman named Baba Vanga who died in 1996. And her track record is disturbing enough that when one of her alleged prophecies started making headlines in 2026, we need to pay attention. Baba Vanga, born, I'm going to butcher this, I apologize now, Vangalia Pandava Gusharova, 1911, in what is now North Macedonia, was a blind mystic who spent most of her life making predictions about the future. She lost her sight at the age of 12 during a massive storm that reportedly threw her into the air and buried her in sand and dust. When she was found, her eyes were sealed shut by debris, and she never saw again. But according to her followers, she started seeing other things. Over the course of her life, Baba Vanga made thousands of predictions. Some were personal. Individuals would visit her seeking guidance about health, relationship, lost relatives. Others were geopolitical. She allegedly predicted the rise and fall of leaders, wars, natural disasters, technological breakthroughs, and some were apocalyptic. She claimed to see centuries into the future, describing events that would reshape human civilization. Here's where it gets complicated. Baba Vanga didn't write anything down herself. She was illiterate. Most of her predictions were recorded by people who visited her, or by her secretary, or by journalists who interviewed her. Those records are incomplete, contradictory, subject to interpretation, which means when someone says Baba Vanga predicted this event, you have to ask, did she actually say that, or is this a retroactive interpretation of something vague she said decades ago? It's a legitimate question, one we should apply to every prophecy, every mystic, or every psychic who claims to see the future. The history of prophecy is full of misattributions, fabrications, and convenient revisions. But here's what makes Baba Vanga different. There are predictions attributed to her, documented before the events occurred, that are specific enough to be falsifiable, and some of them have come true. She allegedly predicted the Kursk submarine disaster in 2000. In 1980, she reportedly said, quote, "At the turn of the century, in August of 99 or 2000, Kursk will be covered with water. The whole world will be weeping over it." At the time, people thought she was talking about the Russian city of Kursk. Made no sense. How does a landlocked city get covered with water? But in August 2000, the Russian submarine Kursk sank during a naval exercise in the Barents Sea, killing all 118 crew members. The submarine was named after the city. She allegedly predicted the September 11th attacks. She reportedly said, "Horror, horror, the American brethren will fall after being attacked by the steel birds. The wolves will be howling in a bush, and innocent blood will be gushing." Steel birds? Twin towers? You can interpret that however you want, but it's specific enough that when the attacks happened, people went back and found the quote. She allegedly predicted the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, the election of Barack Obama, describing him as the 44th president and the last African-American president, though that second part remains to be seen. The rise of ISIS, the Russian annexation of Crimea. Are all of these predictions legitimate? Probably not. Some are almost certainly fabrications or reinterpretations, but the fact that even a handful of them are documented and specific, it's pretty unusual. Most psychics, when you look at their actual track record, are wrong far more than they're right. They make hundreds of vague predictions. A few line up with real events, and those are the ones that get remembered, while the failures are quietly forgotten. But Baba Vanga's predictions, some of them are hitting at a rate that's hard to dismiss as pure coincidence. And that brings us to 2026. According to sources that claim to be reporting Baba Vanga's predictions, she foresaw an event occurring in November of 2026, an event involving extraterrestrial contact. Specifically, she allegedly predicted that, quote, "a large spacecraft would appear over Earth, and that this event would mark the beginning of a new era for humanity." Before we go any further, let's address the obvious problem with this claim. First, the sourcing is murky. I haven't found a primary document where Baba Vanga says these exact words. The prediction appears in articles and websites that compile her prophecies, but they don't cite specific interviews or recordings. So it's possible this is a fabrication, someone inventing a prophecy and attributing it to her because her name carries weight. Second, even if she did make this prediction, the language is vague. A large spacecraft? What does that mean? How large? What kind of spacecraft? Human-made? Alien? And appears over Earth? Does that mean it lands, just flies by, makes contact, or is it just a sighting? Third, November 2026 is still 10 months away, so we can't verify whether this prediction is accurate. We're sitting here in January, talking about something that allegedly won't happen until the end of the year. This could be completely wrong, and we won't know until November comes and goes without incident. But here's why I'm including this in tonight's episode. Even if the prediction is fake, even if Baba Vanga never said anything about 2026, the fact that this prophecy is circulating right now at a time when UFO and UAP disclosure is accelerating, when governments are admitting They have data on unidentified objects when the scientific community is taking the possibility of extraterrestrial intelligence more seriously than ever before. That's significant. Prophecies don't exist in a vacuum. They influence behavior, shape expectations. If millions of people believe something is going to happen in November 2026, and if those people start looking for signs that the prophecy is coming true, then even a mundane event can be interpreted as fulfillment. A meteor shower becomes a sign. A satellite deployment becomes evidence. A military exercise becomes proof. And if something genuinely anomalous happens in November, something that would normally be dismissed or explained away, the prophecy creates a framework that makes people pay attention. So let's explore the possibilities. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that Baba Vanga did make this prediction, and let's say something happens in November 2026 that resembles what she described. What would that look like? Possibility 1. A genuine extraterrestrial spacecraft appears in Earth's atmosphere. Visible, undeniable, recorded by thousands of cameras across multiple continents. Not a fleeting sighting that vanishes before anyone can verify it. Not a grainy video that could be anything. But a massive object that hovers, maneuvers, and demonstrates technology beyond human capability. If that happens, we're looking at a paradigm shift unlike anything in human history. It's one thing to speculate about alien life. It's another thing to have it show up unannounced and park itself over a major populated area. The social, political, and religious implications would be staggering. Governments would have to respond, scientists would have to explain, and the general public, most of whom still think UFOs are fringe nonsense, would have to reckon with the fact that we're not alone. But here's what's bothering me about this scenario. If an advanced extraterrestrial civilization wanted to make contact, why now? Why November 2026? What's special about that moment in human history? Are we reaching some kind of threshold? Some kind of technological or social development that makes us worth engaging with? Or is this something else? A timeline we're not aware of? An event that's already been set in motion? Because if Baba Vanga predicted this decades ago, and if it happens exactly as she described, then it raises the disturbing possibility that the future isn't random, that there's a schedule, a plan, and we're just following it. Possibility number 2, a human-made spacecraft appears over the Earth. Something classified, something that's been in development for decades in black budget programs, and is revealed in a controlled disclosure event designed to shift the global conversation about space, defense, and technology. This would explain why the event is predicted. Not because Baba Vanga had a mystical insight into the future, but because the plan has been in place for years. Governments and military contractors have been working toward a reveal date, and information about that plan leaked into fringe communities, where it got picked up and attributed to prophecy. It happened before. During the Cold War, psychics and mystics would make predictions about the Soviet technology, American weapons programs, geopolitical shifts, and sometimes they'd be eerily accurate, not because they could see the future, but because they had sources, people inside the system who were leaking information in ways that couldn't be directly traced back to them. They tell a psychic something. The psychic makes a prediction. The prediction comes true, and suddenly you've got plausible deniability. You didn't leak classified information, you just talked to a mystic. So it's possible that Baba Vanga or someone claiming to report her predictions was fed information by a planned event. And now, decades later, we're watching the plan unfold. Possibility number 3. Nothing happens. November 2026 comes and goes, and there's no spacecraft, no contact, no revelation. The prophecy was wrong, or it was fabricated, or it was misinterpreted, and life continues as normal. This is the most likely outcome. The track record of prophecy across all cultures, all time periods, all mystics is the most predictions fail. They either don't come true at all, or they come true in such a vague, watered-down way that calling it a success is generous. But even if nothing happens, the prophecy will still matter. The people who believe in Baba Vanga won't accept that she was wrong. They'll reinterpret the prediction, say that the spacecraft appeared but it was hidden, or that the contact happened but it was kept secret, or that the timeline shifted and the event is still coming, just delayed. Prophecy has a way of surviving failure. The human mind is incredibly good at finding patterns, even where none exist. And once you've committed to the idea that someone can see the future, You'll bend reality to fit their predictions rather than admit that they were just guessing. But here's the part I keep coming back to. Baba Vanga's track record. Whatever you think of prophecy in general is better than most. She made specific falsifiable predictions, and some of them came true. Not all, probably not even most, but enough that dismissed her entirely feels intellectually lazy. So, what if she did see something? What if there's a mechanism, something we don't understand yet, that allows certain people under the certain conditions to perceive future events, not with perfect clarity, not with complete accuracy, but with enough detail to be unsettling? We know time is more flexible than we intuitively understand. Relativity tells us that time slows down near massive objects, that it flows differently at different speeds, that simultaneously is relative depending on your frame of reference. So the idea that the future is locked in and can somehow be perceived is not as absurd as it sounds. There are theoretical models in physics, like the block universe model, that suggest past, present, and future all exist simultaneously, that time is just another dimension, and our perception of it as a flowing river is an illusion created by consciousness. If that's true, then the future is already there. It's already happened, and we just haven't experienced it yet from our perspective. And if the future is already there, then maybe some people, through mechanisms we don't understand, neurological anomalies, altered states of consciousness, sensitivity to quantum information, can catch glimpses of it. Fragments, flashes, enough to describe events before they happen, but not enough to understand the full context. That would explain why prophecies are often vague, why they're open to interpretation. The prophet isn't seeing the future clearly, they're seeing impressions, images, feelings, and they're translating those impressions into language, which distorts the message even further. Baba Vanga describes steel birds attacking American brethren. She didn't say terrorists will fly hijacked planes into the World Trade Center, but the image was there. The steel birds, the falling towers, the innocent blood, close enough to be chilling when you look back at it. So if she said something about a large spacecraft appearing in November 2026, what did she actually see? What impression was she translating into those words? Was it a literal spacecraft, or was it something else? A metaphor for an event she couldn't describe any other way. And if something does happen in November, will we recognize it as the fulfillment of the prophecy? Or will it be so different from what we expected that we miss it entirely? Because that's the thing about prophecy. It's only useful if you recognize the event when it happens. If Baba Vanga saw something we don't have the framework to understand yet, then her description won't make sense until after the fact. And by then, it's too late to prepare. So we're left in this strange position. We have a prophecy that may or may not be legitimate, describing an event that may or may not happen, attributed to a woman who may or may not have the ability to see the future, and all we can do is wait. 10 months. That's how long we have to wait until November 2026. And in those 10 months, we'll be watching, looking for signs, analyzing reports, monitoring the skies, because if Baba Vanga was right about the Kirks, about the towers, about the tsunami, then maybe, just maybe, she's right about this one too. And if a large spacecraft appears over Earth in November, if the skies open up and something emerges that we can't explain, then we'll have to confront the possibility that the future isn't as uncertain as we think. That there are patterns, trajectories, events that are locked in and waiting to unfold. Or maybe nothing will happen. Maybe November will pass and we'll move on to the next prophecy, the next prediction, the next claim that someone somewhere knows that's coming. But until then, we watch, we wait, and we wonder whether Baba Vanga saw something that we're about to experience firsthand. Because if she did, then everything changes in November. All right, on to our last segment of the night. Man, this is a long one. We need to talk about something that's threatening to destroy an entire field of study.
Walmart Business is in the business of saving you time, money, and hassle. Whether your business started in a garage or is a garage, Walmart Business has the tools to help you get where you're going. Tools like free shipping, multi-user accounts, and just about any item your company needs.
Even a double filtration cyclone dust collector.
Yep, even that.
Sweet.
Walmart Business. It's the Walmart you love. Now for your business. Learn more at business.walmart.com. Terms apply.
New year, same extra value meals at McDonald's. So now get 2 snack wraps, plus fries, and a medium soft drink for just $8.
For limited time only. Prices and participation may vary. Prices may be higher in Hawaii, Alaska, and California, and for delivery.
Well, the holidays have come and gone once again. But if you've forgotten to get that special someone in your life a gift, well, Mint Mobile is extending their holiday offer of half off unlimited wireless. So here's the idea. You get it now. You call it an early present for next year. What do you have to lose? Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Limited time 50% off regular price for new customers. Upfront payment required. $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan. Taxes and fees extra. Speeds may slow after 50 gigabytes per month when network is busy. See terms.
Close to my heart. Not through lack of evidence, not through debunking, but through an overwhelming flood of fake evidence, so convincing that it's becoming impossible to tell what's real anymore. January 3rd, 2026, researchers and cryptozoology enthusiasts started noticing something disturbing. Videos of cryptids, Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, Chupacabra, and Mothman were appearing on social media and video platforms at an unprecedented rate. Now, of course, this has been happening for way longer than January 3rd. But the article that I read to produce this segment was published on January 3rd, so that's what I went with. And they weren't blurry. Fakey cam footage shot on a phone from 200 yards away. They were high definition, stabilized, well lit, showing creatures in vivid detail as they moved through forests, cross roads, emerged from water. They were perfect, too perfect, because they were AI generated, created by sophisticated video synthesis models that can take a prompt or a text prompt like Bigfoot crossing a highway at dusk and produce footage that looks completely real. For texture, movement physics, lighting that matches the environment, shadows that fall correctly. Everything your brain expects to see when watching real video. And the models are getting better. Every month, every week, the quality improves. The tells that used to give away synthetic video, weird hand movements, facial distortions, physics glitches are disappearing. We're rapidly approaching a point where AI-generated video is indistinguishable from footage captured by a camera. And when that happens, when you can't trust your eyes anymore, everything falls apart. Cryptozoology, the study of hidden animals, creatures that haven't been formally recognized by mainstream science, has always operated in a weird space between legitimate zoology and pure folklore. On one hand, you have serious researchers, people with backgrounds in biology, ecology, and wildlife conservation who investigate reports of unknown animals because history has shown us that new species are discovered all the time. The okapi, the giant squid, the coelacanth, all of these were considered myths or extinct until physical evidence proved otherwise. On the other hand, you have hoaxers, people who fake footprints, costume up as Bigfoot, Photoshop images, and fabricate evidence for attention, money, or just to see if they can fool people. And cryptozoology has always had to navigate this minefield. Every piece of evidence has to be scrutinized. Every video analyzed for signs of manipulation. Every photograph verified. But the traditional hoaxes, guys in gorilla suits, plaster casts made from carved wooden feet, edited photos with blur added to hide the seams, those are detectable. Experts can spot them, analyze gait patterns, muscle movement, fur texture, examine pixels, look for compression artifacts, check metadata. Over time, the cryptozoology community develops protocols, ways to separate genuine evidence from fakes. AI-generated content breaks those protocols. The artifacts aren't there. The tells aren't there. The video isn't edited or composited from multiple sources. It's synthesized from scratch. And the AI is trained on millions of hours of real footage. It knows how light behaves, knows how muscles move, knows how fur responds to wind and how water ripples when something moves through it. And because the AI is generating every frame from a statistical model of reality, it doesn't make the mistakes a human hoaxer makes. There's no zipper on the costume, no visible wires, no continuity errors, just clean, coherent footage that looks exactly like what you'd expect to see if you actually filmed a cryptid in the wild. The first wave of these videos appeared in late 2025. but they were obvious. The models were still early. The movements were slightly off. The textures didn't quite match. But by January 2026, the quality has improved to the point where even experienced researchers were having trouble distinguishing real footage from synthetic. And that's when the panic starts. If you can't trust video evidence anymore, then what do you have left? Eyewitness testimony? That's always been the weakest form of evidence. Memory is unreliable. Perception is biased. People see what they expect to see, especially in low light conditions or high stress situations. Physical evidence? Footprints can be faked. Hair samples can be planted. And even when you get legitimate biological material, it usually turns out to be from a known animal: bears, wolves, deer, not even an unknown cryptid. Or not an unknown cryptid. Video was the gold standard. Not perfect, but better than anything else. If you had clear footage of an animal that didn't match any known species, if experts could analyze the movement, the anatomy, the behavior, then you had something worth investigating, something that could potentially lead to a formal discovery. But now you can generate that footage in minutes. You can create an entire library of cryptid videos, each one showing a different creature in a different environment, all of them completely fake, but visually indistinguishable from real recordings. And the people creating these videos aren't doing it for research. They're doing it for views, for engagement, for the thrill of watching people argue in the comments about whether the footage is real. Some of them are upfront about it. They tag their videos as AI generated. They explain the process. They treat it as digital art. But others present their synthetic footage as genuine. They add captions like, quote, "filmed this in the woods behind my house," or "caught this on my trail cam last night." They fabricate backstories, engage with skeptics and believers as if the video is real. And it works. People want to believe. They want the Loch Ness Monster to be real. They want Bigfoot to exist. So when they see high-quality footage that confirms their belief, they don't question it as aggressively as they should. They share it, defend it, build narratives around it. And by the time someone proves it's AI generated, if they can prove it, the video has already spread across platforms, been embedded in articles, cited in podcasts, and entered the cultural consciousness as that amazing Bigfoot footage from 2026. The damage is already freaking done. Let's talk about what that means for cryptozoology. This isn't an inconvenience. This, unfortunately, is an existential threat. Cryptozoology has always struggled with credibility. Mainstream science treats it as a pseudoscience. Universities don't offer degrees in it. Funding is almost non-existent. The researchers who dedicate their lives to investigating unknown animals do it on their own time, with their own money, because they genuinely believe there are undiscovered species out there, and someone needs to look for them. And they've had some successes. The mountain gorilla was considered a myth until 1902. The Komodo dragon wasn't confirmed until 1910. The megamouth shark, a 15-foot-long filter feeder, wasn't discovered until 1976. So the idea that there are large animals still out there hiding in remote regions, avoiding human contact, is not absurd. It's plausible. But every time a hoax gets exposed, it damages the field's credibility. Every guy in a gorilla suit, every faked photograph, every fabricated footprint reinforces the mainstream narrative that cryptozoology is a joke, that the people involved are gullible, uncritical, willing to believe anything. And the researchers know this. They police their own community, call out hoaxes, demand evidence, apply the same standards of scrutiny that any scientist would apply to any extraordinary claim, because they know that if they let fake evidence slide, then no one will take them seriously when they find something real. But AI-generated content makes that policing almost impossible. You can't call out every fake video. There are too many of them. They're being created faster than they can be debunked, and the people creating them don't care about credibility. They're not part of the cryptozoology community. They're content creators, digital artists, trolls, people who have no investment in the field and no concern about the damage they're causing. So what happens when every piece of video evidence is suspect? When you can't trust anything unless you were there to film it yourself. When even the most compelling footage could be dismissed as AI generated regardless of whether it's real. You get paralysis, a situation where genuine evidence, if it exists, gets drowned out by the noise, where researchers stop sharing their findings publicly because they know it'll just get lumped in with the fakes. Trust me, I fucking hate that. Sorry. Where the entire field retreats into obscurity because the signal to noise ratio has become so skewed that meaningful investigation is no longer possible. And here's the really insidious part. This isn't just happening to cryptozoology, it's happening to everything. UFO footage. AI can generate that. Ghost videos, synthetic. Paranormal activity caught on camera, fake. Any phenomenon that relies on visual evidence is now vulnerable to the same attack. The tools to create this content are freely available. You don't need extensive software or specialized training, just a computer, an internet connection, and a text-to-video AI model. Which means we're entering an era where video evidence, something we've relied on for over a century to document reality, is no longer trustworthy by default. We're going to have to develop a new verification methods. Digital signatures, blockchain authentication, hardware-level encoding that prove a video was captured by a specific camera at a specific time and place. But even those solutions aren't perfect. Once technology exists to verify authentic footage, the technology to fake that verification will appear shortly after. It's an arms race. And in an arms race between people trying to preserve truth and people trying to generate convincing fakes, the fakes have an advantage. They only need to fool people once. The truth has to be defended constantly. So where does that leave cryptozoologists who've spent years investigating reports, analyzing evidence, trying to separate signal from noise? In a very difficult position, they're facing a flood of synthetic evidence designed to look exactly like the real thing, and they don't have the resources to combat it. No funding for advanced digital forensics, no institutional support, no mainstream credibility to fall back on when they try to explain why this particular video is fake. But that other one might be real. And the public, the people who watch these videos, share them, argue about them. They're not equipped to tell the difference either. Most people don't know what to look for, don't know about micro expressions, gate analysis, lighting consistency, shadow physics. They see a video that looks real and they assume it is real, or they see a video that looks fake and they assume it is fake, but conclusions might be wrong. So we're losing our ability to collectively agree on what's real and what's terrifying, not just for cryptozoology, but for society as a whole. If you can't trust video, what can you trust? Eyewitness accounts? Those have always been unreliable. Photographs? Even easier to fake than video. Audio recordings? Unfortunately, AI can generate those too. Voice cloning technology is already frighteningly good. Frighteningly good. Physical evidence? That can be planted, fabricated, and misidentified. We're approaching a point where reality itself becomes contested, where every piece of evidence can be challenged, where every claim requires levels of verification that are impractical for everyday use. And in that environment, truth becomes whatever narrative has the most compelling presentation, regardless of whether it corresponds to actual events. This is what the researchers who noticed the surge in AI-generated cryptid videos in 2026 are worried about. Not just that their field is being polluted with fake evidence, but that we're witnessing the collapse of a foundational assumption about how we know what's real. For decades, we've operated under the belief that seeing is believing, that if you can capture something on camera, you've documented reality. That belief is dying. We don't have a replacement for it yet. So what do we do? Some researchers are advocating for a return to physical evidence. Forget the videos, focus on DNA samples, footprints, hair, scat, biological material that can be tested in a lab. If you claim you found a Bigfoot, don't show me a video. Show me tissue samples. Show me something that can be sequenced, analyzed, and compared to known species. But that approach has its own problems. Physical evidence can be fake too. And even when it's genuine, it's often inconclusive. Hair that doesn't match any known animal? Could be a hybrid, could be a contaminated sample, could be degraded DNA that's missing key markers. It's evidence, yes, but it's rarely definitive. Others are calling for better digital forensics, tools that can analyze video at the frame level, looking for the subtle artifacts that AI models leave behind, inconsistencies in compression patterns, anomalies in pixel distributed, statistical signatures that indicate synthesis rather than capture, Those tools already exist. They're being developed by researchers in computer science, digital media, and cybersecurity, but they're not foolproof. The AI models are improving faster than the detection methods. Every time someone develops a test that can identify synthetic video, the next generation of AI is trained to pass that test. It's an asymmetric battle. The people creating fake content have more resources, more talent, and more motivation than the people trying to detect it. There's money in creating viral content, fame, influence, but there's very little reward for being the person who says, actually, that's fake. So the fakes will keep coming. They'll keep getting better. And the line between real and synthetic will keep blurring until it disappears entirely. And when that happens, when we reach the point where AI-generated video is completely indistinguishable from authentic footage, we'll have to make a choice. Do we abandon video evidence altogether? Treat every recording as suspect unless proven otherwise? Retreat to a pre-digital epistemology where only direct personnel experience counts as knowledge? Or do we develop new framework for trust, new systems for verification, new ways of establishing provenance and authenticity that don't rely on what our eyes tell us? Because the cryptid crisis, the flood of AI-generated Bigfoot videos, Loch Ness Monster footage, and Mothman sightings, that's just the beginning. The same technology that's polluting cryptozoology is going to spread to journalism, law enforcement, politics, history, and every domain where visual evidence matters. And we're not ready for it. We don't have the infrastructure. We don't have the literacy. We don't have the cultural practices that would allow us to navigate a world where video can't be trusted. So we're going to stumble through this transition. We're going to make mistakes, believe things that aren't true, and dismiss things that are. Watch society fracture along lines of, quote, what evidence do you accept as real? And whose verification methods do you trust? And in the chaos, in the noise, real discoveries are going to get lost. Here's the thing that keeps me up at night. What if, in January 2026, someone actually filmed a cryptid? What if, buried in the avalanche of AI-generated content, there's one genuine video, one piece of authentic evidence showing an unknown animal in its natural habitat? How would we know? How would we distinguish that one real video from 1,000 or thousands of synthetic ones? What if the discovery of the century is sitting on a hard drive somewhere, ignored, dismissed, written off as obviously AI-generated because we've trained ourselves to assume everything is fake? That's the real crisis. Not that we're being fooled by synthetic content, but that we're becoming so paranoid, so skeptical, so overwhelmed by fakes that we can't recognize the truth when it appears in front of us. The researchers who documented this surge in AI-generated cryptid videos in January 2026 are sounding the alarm. They're saying, this is a problem. This is going to destroy our ability to investigate unknown animals. We need solutions. We need standards. We need help. But I'm not sure anyone's listening. The people who create AI models are focused on making the technology better, not on mitigating the harm it causes. The platforms that host the content are focused on engagement, not on truth. And the public is just trying to figure out what's real and what's not, one viral video at a time. So the crisis continues. The fakes keep coming. And cryptozoology, a field that was already struggling for legitimacy, is drowning in synthetic evidence that it has no way to combat. And maybe that's the future we're headed towards. A world where every field of inquiry that relies on visual documentation faces the same existential threat. Where the tools we develop to capture and preserve reality become the very things that make reality impossible to verify. It's not a future I'm looking forward to, but it's the future we're building. One AI-generated video at a time. What's up, Grizz? Thanks for showing up, man. Well, that's it for today's main show. 5 stories, 5 threads, and they're all connected by the same question. What happens when the tools we use to understand reality stop working? AI finding patterns in UFO data that suggests intentionality, a structure 2,570 meters underwater that shouldn't exist. A 10-second signal from 8.7 billion light years away. A prophecy predicting alien contact this November. And AI-generated cryptid videos so convincing we can't trust our eyes anymore. 5 different stories, same crisis running through all of them. The tools we use to verify truth are the same tools that can fabricate lies. The technologies we use to extend our senses can deceive us more effectively than our senses ever could. We're living through the moment where the old frameworks stop working, but the new ones haven't been established yet. So what do? Starts with humanity, acknowledging that our tools are fallible and our understanding is incomplete. Continues with curiosity, a willingness to investigate even unlikely claims, but it also claims or requires discipline. A refusal to accept easy answers, a willingness to say, I don't know, when the evidence isn't strong enough. We're living in a time where AI can generate reality, where oceans hide structures we can't explain, where signals from distant civilizations might be reaching us, and where the skies are full of objects operating according to rules we don't understand. All of it could be real, or it could be noise. But that's why we're here. Someone needs to pay attention. Someone needs to ask the uncomfortable questions. And every once in a while, we find something real, something that suggests the world is stranger than we're allowed to admit. If you want access to all our sources and references, head over to patreon.com/infinite rabbit hole. That's also where you'll get segment 6, our Patreon exclusive deep dive into psychedelic assisted therapy moving mainstream. And to watch us record live, join us on Twitch at twitch.tv/infinite rabbit hole. You can also do so on YouTube. Subscribe wherever you're listening and share the show with someone willing to question what they think they know. Until next time, travelers, we'll see you right here at the next fork in the path of the infinite rabbit hole. Peace.